The first sign something was wrong was the pickup truck parked in my driveway. The second sign was the smoke curling out of my chimney. And the third sign was the strange feeling in my gut telling me I was about to be informed that I no longer belonged in my own life. My name is Ethan Walker, and this happened 3 years ago in a small mountain community outside Cedar Ridge, Montana. My parents bought that cabin when I was 8 years old. It wasn't worth much on paper, but to me it was priceless. Every scratch in the wooden floors had a story attached to it. Every crooked shelf had been installed by my dad after watching exactly one home improvement video and deciding he was suddenly a master carpenter. My mom used to joke that the entire cabin was held together by coffee, optimism, and hardware store discounts. After both of them passed away, the cabin became mine. I didn't rent it out. I didn't list it online. It wasn't some investment property sitting in a spreadsheet. It was home. The problem was life got busy. I lived in Billings. My job kept me traveling. Months would pass before I could make the drive into the mountains. Every time I thought about visiting, something came up. A project, a deadline, a family obligation. 1 year turned into almost 2. And then one Saturday morning, I finally decided to head up there. The road looked exactly the same. Tall pine trees, sharp mountain air, the little creek that ran beside the highway. For the first hour, I actually felt good. Nostalgic. I remember smiling when I passed the old gas station where my dad always stopped for beef jerky he definitely wasn't supposed to be eating. Then I turned the final corner and saw that truck. A dark blue Ford parked exactly where my truck usually sat. I slowed down, confused more than worried. Maybe a maintenance crew, maybe a neighbor, maybe somebody got lost. Then I noticed the curtains. Heavy brown curtains hanging in the front windows. My mother hated curtains. She used to say if God gave you mountains to look at, blocking them should be considered crime. Those curtains definitely weren't hers. Neither was the flower box sitting beneath the front porch. Neither was the welcome mat. Neither was the mailbox. I pulled into the gravel driveway and just sat there staring. The chimney smoke drifted lazily into the sky. Someone was home. Someone was comfortable. Someone was making themselves very comfortable. I climbed out of my truck and walked toward the front door. I didn't even make it halfway. The door swung open. A man stepped outside. Late 50s. Gray hair slicked back. Clean polo shirt. Perfect posture. The kind of guy who looked like he practiced authority in front of a mirror. He glanced at me the way people glance at strangers who accidentally wander on a private property. "Can I help you?" he asked. I actually laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because my brain hadn't caught up yet. "Yeah," I said. "You can start by telling me why you're standing on my porch." His expression didn't change. Not even a little. "This property is under community management," he replied. Community management. I remember those exact words because they sounded ridiculous. What does that even mean? It means this property was deemed abandoned under association bylaws. For a second, I genuinely thought he was joking. Then I realized he wasn't. My smile disappeared. "I'm sorry," I said. "What?" He folded his hands calmly in front of him. The property was abandoned. Preservation measures were authorized. Occupancy was approved. The way he said it made my skin crawl. Not angry. Not defensive. Confident. Like he'd repeated that explanation 100 times. "My name is Ethan Walker," I said slowly. "My parents owned this cabin. They passed away. I inherited it. I still own it." He nodded politely, almost sympathetically. As far as our records indicated, the property had been neglected for an extended period. Our records. That phrase stuck with me. Because records can be manipulated. Facts are harder. I looked past him into the cabin, and that's when my stomach dropped. The furniture was gone. The old leather couch my dad loved was gone. The dining table where my family spent every Christmas was gone. The framed photographs were gone. Everything that made the cabin mine had vanished. In their place sat furniture I'd never seen before. Modern, expensive, carefully arranged, like somebody had redesigned my childhood. Then I saw a woman walking through the kitchen. She opened a cabinet, grabbed a coffee mug, and moved through the room with the confidence of someone who had done it 1,000 times. She never even looked at me. That hurt more than I expected, because somehow that made it real. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't somebody checking on the place. These people lived here. I felt anger rising in my chest. Fust. Huh, dangerous. Every instinct told me to push past him and call the sheriff. But another part of me noticed something. He wasn't nervous. People who are lying usually talk too much. This guy barely talked at all. That meant he believed he was protected. By paperwork, by procedure, by something. So instead of exploding, I asked one simple question. Can I see the documents? For the first time, a tiny smile appeared. Not a friendly smile. A confident one. The records are available during business hours. Then he stepped slightly to the side. Not enough to be obvious. Just enough to block the doorway. And right then I knew something important. This wasn't the beginning of the story. It was the middle. Because whatever had happened here had been happening for a very long time. And as I turned back toward my truck, I noticed something attached to the porch railing. A gray lockbox. The kind real estate agents use. On the side was a faded sticker displaying the logo of the Pine Hollow Property Association. That was the moment everything changed. Because lockboxes mean access. Access means systems. And systems mean planning. This wasn't some random mistake. Someone had built an entire process around taking things that didn't belong to them. What I didn't know yet was that my cabin wasn't the first property involved. And before this was over, an entire community was about to discover exactly how deep that rabbit hole went. I didn't call the sheriff that day. A lot of people tell me they would have. Maybe they're right. Maybe that's exactly what I should have done. But something about the way that man stood in my doorway kept bothering me during the entire drive back to Billings. He wasn't acting like a squatter. He wasn't acting like a thief. He was acting like a manager, like somebody following a process. And people who hide behind processes usually leave paper trails. By the time I got home, I wasn't angry anymore. At least not in the explosive way. The anger had turned into something colder, more useful. I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook and started writing down every detail I could remember. The truck, the lockbox, the furniture, the woman in the kitchen, the exact phrases he'd used. Community management, preservation measures, abandoned property. The more I wrote, the more one thought kept repeating itself. Nobody walks into someone else's house and starts redecorating unless they believe they can get away with it. The next morning, I opened my email and searched the name of the Homeowners Association. Pine Hollow Property Association. 27 emails appeared. 27. I stared at the screen. Apparently, I'd spent the last 2 years treating HOA emails the same way most people treat advertisements for car insurance. Open, skim, ignore, delete. The earliest messages were harmless enough. Maintenance reminders, community newsletters, snow removal notices. But then the tone changed. Violation notices, inspection requests, warnings, escalations. Every message came from the same person. Gavin Mercer, association president, the man standing in my doorway. I spent hours reading every email. By midnight, my eyes hurt. My coffee was cold, and I finally found what I was looking for. A message sent 14 months earlier. Subject line, Emergency Preservation Action Notice. The email referenced a specific section of the HOA bylaws. I downloaded the bylaws and started reading. 49 pages. The kind of document written by people who think ordinary English is too efficient. But eventually I found the section, and the more I read, the stranger everything became. According to the rules, before any property could be classified as abandoned, four things had to happen. Certified written notice, a 60-day correction period, a formal hearing, and a recorded board vote. For separate steps, for separate opportunities for the owner to respond. I had received exactly 0. That was the moment I stopped wondering if something improper had happened. Now I was trying to figure out how. The next day, I logged into my postal service account. Every piece of mail delivered to my addresses had been scanned for years. Tax forms, utility bills, junk mail, birthday cards, everything. There wasn't a single certified letter from the association. Not one. I checked again. Nothing. Either Gavin Mercer had lied, or the letters had gone somewhere else. That thought sent me digging into county records. And 20 minutes later, I found something that made my stomach tighten. My mailing address on the tax records had changed. 2 years earlier. Without my knowledge. Without my authorization. For years, property tax notices had gone to my Billings address. Then suddenly they were being mailed directly to the cabin. I stared at the screen for a long time, because once you understand what that means, everything changes. If tax notices are being sent to a cabin you rarely visit, you never see them. You never see warning letters. You never see deadlines. You never see problems. You just slowly disappear from your own property. The next morning, I called the county office. A clerk named Donna answered. She sounded exhausted in the way government employees often sound around 10 in the morning. I explained the situation. She spent a few minutes checking records. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. Your taxes have been paid on time. I blinked. What? Paid on time? Every year. I leaned back in my chair. By me. There was a pause. More typing. No. I felt my heartbeat speed up. No. The payment source changed about 18 months ago. 18 months. Long enough to establish a pattern. Long enough to create a narrative. Long enough for somebody to later claim they had been maintaining the property. Protecting it. Investing in it. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat in silence. A strange memory floated back into my mind. Something my father used to say. If a story requires too many coincidences, somebody is lying. At that point, there were already too many coincidences. The altered address, the missing notices, the tax payments, the occupation, the furniture. None of it happened accidentally. And once I accepted that, I started asking a different question. What if I wasn't the only one? That weekend, I built a spreadsheet. Not because I'm some kind of genius investigator. I'm actually pretty terrible with spreadsheets. But numbers tell stories when people don't. The association had 68 properties. I started categorizing them. Primary residences, vacation homes, inherited properties, rental cabins, absentee owners. Patterns started appearing, and those patterns were ugly. Properties owned by people who lived elsewhere received dramatically more violation notices, more inspections, more enforcement actions, more preservation reviews. The gap wasn't subtle. It was massive. By Sunday night, I knew enough to realize something bigger was happening. I just didn't know who could confirm it. Then fate handed me an answer. Actually, fate looked a lot like an old meeting roster buried in HOA documents. A former board member named Rachel Bennett. She had resigned 3 years earlier after filing a governance complaint. The complaint had been dismissed. The file was thin, too thin, which made me curious. I found a phone number, called it, expected voicemail. Instead, she answered immediately. I introduced myself. There was silence. Then she sighed, a long, tired sigh, and said something that made the hair stand up on my neck. I've been waiting for this call. We met 2 days later at a diner outside Cedar Ridge. Rachel arrived carrying a cardboard storage box. Not a folder, a box. That was my first clue. People don't keep boxes unless they're expecting a fight someday. She sat down across from me, ordered black coffee, then pushed the box toward me. You should probably look at this. Inside were meeting notes, financial reports, emails, copies of resolutions, handwritten records, years' worth of documentation. I spent the next hour reading, and the deeper I went, the worse it got. Reserve fund money had vanished. Maintenance contracts had been awarded to relatives. Votes had appeared in records before meetings were held. Entire discussions had apparently occurred without witnesses. Rachel watched me quietly. Finally, she said, I wasn't removed because I was wrong. I looked up. She gave a bitter smile. I was removed because I kept asking questions. Then she showed me another file. Another cabin. Another absentee owner. An elderly widow living in Arizona. The same abandoned property designation. The same preservation action. The same occupancy approval. The same sequence. Almost identical. I felt cold. Not angry. Cold. Because this wasn't chaos. It wasn't incompetence. It was a business model. A slow-moving machine. And suddenly Gavin Mercer's confidence made perfect sense. People who get away with something once are cautious. People who get away with it repeatedly become comfortable. That night, I drove home in complete silence. No music. No radio. Nothing. Just my thoughts. And somewhere during that drive, a realization finally settled in. I wasn't dealing with a bully. I wasn't dealing with an overreaching HOA president. I was dealing with somebody who had spent years convincing himself he owned things simply because nobody stopped him. What I didn't realize yet was that the single biggest mistake Gavin Mercer had ever made wasn't hidden in financial records. It wasn't buried in meeting minutes. It wasn't in the tax documents. It was sitting in plain sight on the mountain. And within a few days, that mistake was going to become the reason his entire operation started falling apart. A few days after meeting Rachel, I was sitting at my desk reviewing property surveys when I noticed something that almost made me spill my coffee. I had looked at that map dozens of times before, maybe hundreds, but this time my eyes stopped on one specific detail. The access road, the narrow dirt road leading from the county highway up to my cabin. At first it seemed insignificant. Then I zoomed in and zoomed in again. My pulse immediately picked up because the road wasn't marked as community property. It wasn't HOA land. It wasn't public access. The entire road sat inside my property boundary. Every inch of it. I called a real estate attorney the next morning. Her name was Lisa Crawford. Sharp, direct, the kind of lawyer who could probably make a parking ticket nervous. I spent nearly an hour explaining everything. The cabin, the altered records, the taxes, the occupation, the HOA, the missing notices, the financial irregularities. She listened quietly. Then I mentioned the road. For the first time, she interrupted me. "Wait," she said. "You're telling me the only road accessing that property belongs to you?" "According to the survey, yes." There was a brief silence. Then she laughed. Not because it was funny, because she suddenly understood something. "So does he." That sentence stuck with me. So does he. Because if Gavin Mercer knew the road belonged to me, then he had knowingly crossed private property every single day for over a year. And if he didn't know, that was somehow even worse. By the end of the call, we had a plan. Not a dramatic plan. Not a reckless plan. A patient one. The following Saturday, I drove back into the mountains. This time I parked nearly half a mile away and approached on foot through the trees. I spent hours documenting everything. Photos, videos, timestamps, the truck, the mailbox, the lockbox, the furniture visible through windows. Even Gavin himself walking across the porch carrying groceries. Every image went into a growing evidence file. Then I walked back down to the property line, the place where my road connected to the public highway. And I stood there for a long time, thinking, remembering. My father used to say something whenever we drive up that mountain. One road, one choice. You either belong there or you don't. For the first time in years, I finally understood what he meant. The gate went up the following week. Heavy steel, solar-powered security camera, private property signs, everything installed legally and professionally. I didn't lock it immediately. That part was intentional. I wanted Gavin to see it. I wanted to know how he'd react when the rules suddenly applied to him. The answer came faster than expected. 48 hours later, an email appeared in my inbox. Subject line, unauthorized structure violation. I laughed out loud. Actually laughed. Because the message claimed I had illegally installed a gate on association property. The problem was simple. It wasn't association property. It never had been. I responded politely. Attached the survey. Attached the deed. Copied my attorney. And wished him a pleasant day. 2 days later, another letter arrived. Different accusation. Same threat. This time the gate supposedly violated community aesthetics. Apparently theft was acceptable, but ugly gates were where they drew the line. I didn't bother responding. There was no point. By then, I had started watching the camera feed. And on the 5th day, I finally got what I wanted. At 9:14, that morning Gavin's truck rolled up to the gate. He climbed out, walked to the sign, read it, then stood perfectly still. For almost 2 minutes. No phone call. No jilling. No dramatic gestures. Just silence. Thinking. Calculating. The look on his face wasn't confusion. It was concern. The kind of concern people get when they realize their assumptions might not survive contact with reality. Things moved quickly after that. Residents began asking questions. Someone brought up reserve fund discrepancies on the community message board. Someone else mentioned unusual enforcement actions. Then another owner shared a story. Then another. Then another. For years, people had assumed they were isolated incidents. Now they were connecting dots. By the time Lisa reviewed my evidence binder, she smiled once and said 4 words. "We're ready to move." The following Monday, we met with the county sheriff. Not a deputy, the sheriff, a calm, practical man named Robert Hayes. He reviewed every document, every photo, every survey, every email. Then he closed the folder, looked at me, and nodded. 3 hours later, we drove up the mountain together. The gate was locked. The camera confirmed someone was inside. The sheriff walked to the front door and knocked. Once, twice. 30 seconds passed. Then the door opened. Gavin appeared, perfectly dressed, perfectly composed, at least for the first few seconds. Then he saw the badge. The sheriff introduced himself, explained why he was there, then asked a very simple question. Do you possess any legal document granting occupancy rights to this property? Gavin immediately launched into a speech. Association bylaws, community preservation, governance authority, administrative procedures. The sheriff listened patiently, then interrupted. Sir, silence. Do you have a deed? No. A lease? No. A court order? The silence this time lasted longer. Behind him, I could see his wife standing in the hallway. Her face had gone completely pale. The sheriff turned toward me. Mr. Walker, are you the legal owner of this property? Yes. He nodded, turned back, then said words Gavin Mercer probably never expected to hear. Sir, you're under arrest for criminal trespass. The handcuffs clicked shut, and the sound was strangely quiet. No shouting, no resistance, no dramatic meltdown, just disbelief. Pure disbelief. As if he had spent so many years creating his own version of reality that he'd forgotten the real one still existed. The news spread through Pine Hollow faster than wildfire. That evening, the community forum exploded. People started sharing stories, violation notices, threats, coercion of elfinis, missing records, meetings they were never informed about. 3 days later, homeowners demanded an emergency meeting. I attended, mostly to listen. Gavin showed up too, out on bail, sitting in the front row, trying desperately to regain control. At one point, he stood and attempted to explain everything as a misunderstanding. That's when an elderly resident named Frank stood up. Frank was 82 years old, former Marine, not known for patience. He pointed directly at Gavin. You lived in another man's cabin for over a year. The room went silent. Frank shrugged. What exactly are we misunderstanding? The vote to remove him from the board was unanimous. The vote for an independent audit was unanimous. The vote to cooperate fully with investigators was unanimous. For the first time, all evening Gavin had nothing to say. The audit findings were ugly. Missing funds, forged records, payments routed through companies connected to family members, unauthorized expenditures, falsified meeting minutes, everything Rachel suspected, and more. Criminal charges followed. Fraud, forgery, trespassing, financial misconduct. Eventually, there was a plea agreement. No prison, probation, restitution, community service. Honestly, part of me wanted harsher consequences. There were moments when I imagined him losing everything the same way he had nearly taken everything from me. But life rarely delivers perfect endings. Instead, it delivered accountability. And sometimes that's enough. The civil settlement covered property damage, lost belongings, legal expenses, back rent, and one final condition my attorney insisted upon. A public written apology posted on the HOA website for an entire year. Surprisingly, they agreed. A year later, the cabin feels like mine again. Not exactly the same. Maybe it never will. Some of my parents' belongings were gone forever. But the family photographs are back on the walls. My father's rocking chair sits beside the fireplace. And every winter, I still make my mother's soup recipe, even though I'm pretty sure she mostly invented it as an excuse to use leftovers. The gate remains at the entrance. People ask why I haven't removed it. The answer is simple. It isn't there because I'm afraid. It's there because I remember. Because sometimes the smallest overlooked detail becomes the thing that saves you. And because every time I drive through those gates, I remember something else too. Power isn't what protects the truth. Patience does. Documentation does. Persistence does. But here's the question I've never been able to answer. If you had been standing on that porch the first day, looking at strangers living inside your family home, Would you have stayed calm and gathered evidence the way I did? Or would you have forced your way inside and dealt with the consequences later? Honestly, I still don't know which answer is right. So let me know what you think in the comments. Where's the line between patience and passivity? Between justice and revenge? And if someone tried to take something that represented your entire family's history, how far would you go to get it back?